Let me tell you about ProHealthConnect.com. It's transforming healthcare payments, providing retailers a seamless process for over-the-counter and healthy benefit programs. By connecting retailers, health plans, and payment processors, ProHealth Connect creates one powerful, unified network. They empower independent grocers and pharmacies to accept health benefit cards without changing how they do business. With over 10,000 locations nationwide, helping more than 1.3 million people access the care and nutrition they need. Go to ProHealthConnect.com.
Listen, all you New Yorkers. Excuse me, taxi.
Okay, man, we're looking around.
This is the 77 WABC minicast.
Well, welcome back to Fernando Matteo, No Excuses. We are here, for those of you that are joining us right now, with David Doe. David Doe was the former taxi and limousine commissioner. And I believe he was probably one of the best commissioners ever to do the job. So welcome, David.
Well, thank you so much, Fernando, and thank you for having me. It's quite an honor to be here with someone who has fought so hard for New Yorkers, from our taxi drivers all the way to our bodega workers. And, you know, you have made a big difference in New York.
Well, listen, David, to be quite honest with you, it's people like you that we should all appreciate. People that take huge responsibilities, make very little money, and all you do is get criticized, and you get very little credit for the hard work that you do. But I want to get right to it. Are drivers better off today than they were before you became commissioner?
Definitely. You know, what I am particularly proud of is the work that the TLC has done over the last 4 years, starting with the medallion debt crisis, where we implemented the MRP Plus program, saving over 2,000 owners of medallions almost $476 million, right? That was just the start. And as you recall, right, there was a deep crisis that taxi drivers were going through. Not only was there advent of new competition from Uber and Lyft that left taxi drivers hanging, but then there was also the COVID-19 pandemic that hurt drivers even more. And so I'm particularly proud, right, that the work of Mayor Mamdani with the hunger strike, with Marblegate, with Field Point, and with the TLC and other stakeholders putting together a plan that worked for individual medallion owners and took them out of crisis. I just remember, right, when I was there with a debt program, right, on the first day, we helped hundreds of drivers. And I just remember one story where a driver and his family no longer had this debt hanging over them, so that they could take their homes away, or their cars, or anything that they needed to have a better life for themselves. And so I'm particularly proud of the MRP Plus program. But there's a lot of work that I'm proud of, from accessibility to driver pay to making this fleet the greenest fleet in the country. We had a successful 4 years, and I'm proud that, you know, the TLC was there, stakeholders like you, advocates, making sure that we pushed to make a better industry for our drivers.
You know that I speak to drivers every day, and every day, regardless to what work you've done, they're never happy. You know, drivers are always complaining about something. And, you know, some cases they're right, some cases they're wrong. For example, there are 180,000 drivers in New York City with TLC licenses, but there's only 100,000 vehicles that are on the road. So you have 80,000 drivers that have a license to operate, but cannot because they don't have a vehicle. Then you have leasing companies that when the TLC released all these plates, the leasing companies came and gobbled most of those plates. So now the drivers have to go to a leasing company in order to get a vehicle to work, right? Some of them pay $500, $600, $700, $800 a week, right? Because they can't get a plate. And I know that you and I have had that discussion in the past. What would have you done differently to make sure that those 80,000 drivers were able to get access to a plate?
The story of plates is a complicated one, and it's a story that has been negotiated before I came there. Will continue to be negotiated, but what I am proud of is the Green Rise Initiative. And I know that we have disagreed in the past about the Green Rise Initiative, which is by 2030 that all...
Explain what the Green Rise Initiative is, because remember, you have listeners that don't know. We're talking about the taxi industry, the industry that moves New York City, and how the drivers feel.
Right.
And we have the commissioner that served for 4 years, which I believe was one of the better commissioners that have gone through the system. But I want to ask him these questions because these are the questions you want answers to.
So the Green Rise Initiative is an initiative that is first in the country that requires Uber and Lyft to dispatch, to green vehicles, or in this case, electric vehicles. By 2030, they need to reach 100% in simple terms. But what I'm particularly proud of during that time was to make sure that if we were to get there, that drivers would have an opportunity to get these licenses, right? And so we release electric vehicle licenses during this time. In fact, we released almost 10,000 vehicle licenses.
How many of those licenses did the leasing companies get?
90% went to individual drivers. So that's
that's a very good number.
Right.
A very, very good number.
And so it is one of those initiatives that now a driver is able to own their own small business, right? Because a vehicle is their own small business.
That's correct.
And so they don't have to pay $400, $500 to a leasing company. That is more money in their pockets. And so that's what I'm particularly proud of. But, at the end of the day, right, there should be additional opportunities for long-term drivers to own their licenses. I'm no longer there, but it is something that I have always thought about, of how do we make sure that more drivers can own their own small businesses so that they can drive for themselves instead of other entities taking away what they earn every single day. My tenure during all 4 years has always been a focus on the individual driver. That's why I was the first commissioner ever to get their TLC license. That's why I went to the hold lots to talk to drivers. That's why I went to the taxi clubhouse. That's why I made sure to connect to individual drivers so that they knew that they had a regulator that fought for them.
You have a situation, David, where Uber and Lyft are basically controlling the taxi industry here in New York, probably all around the world, right? You have these huge global companies that have billions and billions of dollars in resources and usually buy their way into whatever they want. They get whatever they want because they have the money to push. At what time were you able to push back on them, without having an issue with City Hall or whomever your boss was at that time?
So Mayor Adams and the Deputy Mayor, Meera Joshi, were always fantastic. They were always behind me and in my court, supporting everything that we did, from Green Rise to accessibility initiatives to everything in between, including increasing driver pay, right, by 58% from between 2021 to 2024. Right. Those are really difficult things to do, especially when you have billion-dollar companies behind them that do not want to pay drivers more.
But guess what? They passed that along to the rider.
Yes.
So now the rider's paying a lot more because the driver needs to make more.
But actually, if you look at the data, in fact, right, they have kept more profits than ever before. Right, so
they do. They take most of.
Let me give context to that. In Ubers and Lyfts, right, they have increased prices, but they have kept most of that. They didn't pass the profits on to drivers. They kept it to themselves. Right,
but the drivers are getting that minimum wage. What is that minimum wage, by the way?
So I think for a 7.5 30-minute trip, it's about $29 at this point. But I think to get back to that piece, right, is that they force passengers to pay more, and yet it doesn't get back to drivers. That's a key point that I want to highlight.
Well, listen, as far as I'm concerned, I think that drivers are doing better today than they ever did. And I think that we owe that to you. The industry owes that to you. So we want to say thanks for that, David.
But, if I could, it wasn't David alone, right? It was the 550 public servants at the Taxi and Limousine Commission. It was a mayor who fought for our drivers and passengers, and it was a deputy mayor who fought for.
Well,
it was everybody. But it was also advocates like you, Fernando. It was advocates like Beta V. It was advocates like Brendan. All of the advocates came together to fight against billion-dollar companies. And I was sued, right, by Uber multiple times. And, we did not buckle to billion-dollar companies. We actually fought against them.
Okay.
And won.
Listen, I think that there's a lot of opportunity for drivers way beyond Uber and Lyft. I don't think that they are making the most of the most money working for Uber and Lyft personally. Okay, that's what I feel, and I'm in the industry every day. You have the non-emergency medical transportation, right? And you also have the accessoride programs, right? These programs all need TLC drivers to do the work. The problem that the government is having is getting enough drivers to stop working for Uber and Lyft to do this kind of work. So the poorest of the poor people, the ones that use non-emergency medical transportation and accessoride, a lot of the times don't get picked up on time or get left stranded. Why is it that you weren't able to create a different category of plates, say 5,000 plates, just for drivers to do this type of work, right? So that the poor of the poorest people are able to get from point A to point B. And those drivers will make just as much, if not more, than working for Uber or Lyft. Mm-hmm. I think that there's a gap there. What do you tell people that are on Medicaid, Medicare, retired, can't afford transportation, are using government transportation to get around? What do you tell them about how you could fix their situation?
Well, I'll tell
them. What would you do?
Sure. I'll tell them that during my tenure, we had one of the most successful reigns around accessibility ever, right? For the first time ever, the yellow taxi fleet last June reached 50% accessible. That was a promise that was made over a decade, and we never achieved it.
No, we're not talking about accessibility, about wheelchair.
Right, let me start there. Right, and then I'll start there and then get into accessoride.
I know we're running. The thing is, we're running.
Okay, I'm sorry.
We're short of time. That's why I
just love
focused.
speaking with you all the time. But we also, right, on Uber and Lyft, made sure that passengers who use wheelchairs and accessibility are within 10 minutes or get a ride within 10 minutes or less. On the other side, right. If you ask for a special category of plates, I think is your question.
Category of plates, yes.
We have always allowed, right, one type of vehicle, which is accessible vehicles, to get plates, and it's still available. And so, the question is there a difference between sedans and a wheelchair?
It's too expensive for drivers.
But people who use accessoride sometimes needs
very rarely.
Well, right. And so, but there is an opportunity to get plates today. And so, I think this is something that we disagreed with over time, over the last 4 years, there isn't any pathway to plates. There is a pathway to plates. And I was the only commissioner, right, as you recall, over the last 4 years to release additional plates outside of the wheelchair accessible plates, right? Yeah. And those are 10,000 EVs.
Listen, you're not there now, so you can't do anything today. But if you could speak to the new commissioner, what would you tell her? First of all, those wheelchair accessible vehicles, those Siennas, cost $60,000 or more. They're too expensive, okay, for drivers to buy them and do NEMT or accessoride trips, right? They're not going to buy these vehicles. Insurance is going through the roof, right? There are ways that I believe the commission, or that you could recommend the commission, a path to being able to serve the poor people. Yeah. Because it's not the people using Uber or Lyft. They can afford it. It's the people that are using government transportation funded programs that need more vehicles just to do that type of work.
Yeah, so the new Commissioner Midori is going to be fantastic.
She is.
And she is amazing. And she doesn't need my advice, right?
Well, listen, you have 4 years of experience
on her. So she is a transportation expert. She worked at the TLC. And so I'm not going to give the commissioner unsolicited advice. But what I could tell you is my core principles, right? Always over the last 4 years is to focus on the drivers and to get a pathway to the middle class for every single driver. And so if that is a core principle that I can follow, then, that is something that, I won't give advice, but it's something that I have followed over the last 4 years.
Well, I still believe that there's a certain segment of our population. Okay, everything today is about affordability. Everything today is about getting from point A to point B. Drivers that are working for Uber and Lyft feel compelled to work with them because they feel that there's no other way of making a living. And that is not the case. There's a lot of different programs set up by the government that pay just as much, if not more, than what Uber and Lyft are paying. Mm-hmm. The thing is that they're all over the place. If there's a category of plates that would be issued just to serve the poorest of the poor, okay? Drivers those 80,000 drivers that don't have a vehicle or a plate would then buy those plates. Right. These plates are not for leasing companies. These plates are not for anyone other than drivers that want to make a living. So I think that there's room and there's a gap for that. But more than anything, I feel sorry for the moms and the dads and the people that need to get to a doctor and can't get there on time because there aren't enough drivers, enough cars on the road at any specific time. Okay. Then the other question is, drivers are saying, why is insurance so high? I know that that's more of a state issue. But I think that if the TLC would have considered putting in a camera in each vehicle, the way Giuliani did it way back when, he made it mandatory for a camera or a partition when crime was very high. Right now, insurance is so expensive because of all the fraud that's being committed. Bikes running into cars, into cabs, and then claiming they can't walk. The people inside the vehicles claiming they have back injury, right? So you have all of these claims that drive insurance up. If you had the proof that it wasn't your fault, that will drive insurance down. See, so that's a simple way of saying, okay, the TLC is going to donate a camera to every driver, have it on, and if there's a claim, we expect that you have the recording for that particular incident. What do you think about something like that?
Well, what I think about it is I want to thank the New York State Federation of Taxi Drivers for their work on a pilot program, right, that looked into this. And so, I think that once it is finished and once a report comes out, that you need to share it with the TLC. I'm no longer at the TLC, and I guess I'm not going to give unsolicited advice to the TLC. But what I know is that the TLC is a data-driven organization. They will leverage the data, they will use the data, and make sure that whatever decision that is made is good for drivers, good for affordability, and make sure that it lowers prices for everyone, including drivers and passengers. And if you can make that proof and you can make that evidence, then of course, right, the TLC will consider it.
Operation Bright Eye was a great program. We put 500 cameras in 500 vehicles together with American Transit and the NYAB brokerage, right? And the Federation. We all came together and said, we've got to do something. We did it. It's proven amazing. We're going to release the data very soon, but it proved that there were no fraud. There was no fraud committed with these 500 vehicles. Therefore, there were no claims with these 500 vehicles. Can you imagine those that are cheating the system? If they know that there's a camera that's going to prove them wrong, they'll stop doing it. but you have doctors, you have lawyers, you have passengers, you have people that are committing these fraudulent claims that are just driving insurance costs up for cab drivers. Listen, we took this segment and we spent it with David Doe, our former commissioner, so that drivers know that they also have a voice here, that there's someone that's going to discuss their issues here on WABC. I will always do that. But I want the drivers to know what the commissioner had done over the last 4 years. And I must commend you. You were one of the best commissioners in the 30 some odd years that the Federation's been around. You were one of the best commissioners to communicate with, to work with. Mira Joshi was also good when she was there. So there's been a few very good commissioners, but David, initially we were sorry to see you go, but I believe that the new commissioner is going to do the right thing and help the drivers out as much as she can. Thank you for coming to WABC Radio, the most listened to radio station in the nation.
All right. Thanks, Fernando.
Roger Stone here. Every day you wait, your money loses value, but gold and silver don't follow those same rules. American Sovereign Bullion gives you access to a nationwide wholesaler network, helping you secure aggressive pricing on real physical metals. Call 844-272-2428 now to get your free gold and silver guide to learn how to protect your wealth with physical gold and silver, delivered right to your door or with a gold IRA. Visit asbgold.com. That's asbgold.com for your free gold and silver guide today.